It's all yours, Bryce.
Thank you. I hope the mic is working. Sounds good. Thank you. This is an honor to be here speaking with you today. My background as a virtual CISO for Above Cloud, which is my company, and basically what we do is try to provide consulting services from a cybersecurity standpoint for all of our clients, no matter how small or how large they may be. I'm also on the board of directors for our ISSA organization, the Puget Sound chapter. Come visit us. Our booth is there. We're a nonprofit. We're organizing and bring professionals like you guys to our monthly meetings. They're over on Mercer Island. We give you a free dinner. It's a really good thing, and we had 80 people show up in August, so would love to have you join us there. In the discussion about CISOs and the first 30 days, first of all, congratulations, you all became a CISO. What does that mean? Well, it means more money, right? More opportunity, and the fun starts once you accept, right? So we're going to be talking a little bit about a timeline of what that looks like. This is the full 90 days. I'm not going to get to that because I got 20 minutes, right? And so there's no way we can talk about anything past 30 today, but it starts with that job interview. We're going to touch on that a little bit right now, because there's things you can do in that job interview that can help position you, right? So whenever you're talking with folks and you're explaining what it is that you're trying to do, what you're trying to, whether it's a CISO job or you're just trying to sell an idea, you really have to think about, well, what does that really mean? What does a CISO mean to this organization? What does that CISO report to a CEO? Does that CISO report to a CIO? What's the reporting structure? So you can start to get an understanding of, is this a good fit for me? And that's where you're coming from, saying, is this a good fit? It's not just about getting that job, it's does it fit your particular skill sets and your particular needs and what you want to gain? So as you start thinking about that fit, come up with questions. And here's why. People judge you based on the questions you ask. You know this. But you can determine your value by asking good, solid questions. Because if you've had poor questions, then I'm going to say, oh, maybe this person doesn't really get what we're trying to do here. But if you ask questions like, okay, does a CISO, is that a true chief level position? What does that mean? Usually it means stock. Usually it means you report to the CEO, maybe the board of directors. Think about those things. How am I being positioned in this? Is there a former CISO in this role, or am I coming in new? These are questions you can ask as you're being interviewed to position yourself, maybe not as an expert per se, but having knowledge about whether this is the right fit for me and for the company. So think about those questions. What I like to suggest is take a consulting perspective, come up with your specific line of questions, whether it's for a gatekeeper in HR or the actual hiring manager, which is perhaps the CEO. Come up with your list of questions and make them intentional and have them up here. So you're not referring to papers, asking your questions, a list. But by doing that, you can give an impression. And yes, this is impression management. It's a CISO, you guys, right? That's the top of the heap. That's where we want to be. So what does that mean? Impression management, okay. Yeah, Bryce, I know NIST. I can do this stuff in my sleep. It's not about that. It's not about jargon. It's about positioning you to be a chief information security officer at that particular company. You're representing them. You're there saying, how I'm going to represent you when I get accosted by a breach or an attack. How am I going to justify or defend or come up with a new defense to get from there? How am I going to look at this from a risk management standpoint, not from a jargon IT perspective or technical way? How am I going to look at that from a business perspective? How can I articulate this in not jargon or IT comments or here's my vulnerabilities even, but from a business standpoint? We've got to talk in business language, which isn't what we're used to. It's out of our comfort zone, right? We're used to talking in jargon. We're used to using acronyms. Every acronym out there, forget them. Don't they don't qualify. There's a speaker earlier today who has that book that I hope you got signed. I did. And he had this whole list of, here's how I talk to the board. There was no jargon in there. There's no abbreviations. It was all about business. And that's what we want to talk about. That's what we want to focus on today. So some of the questions you want to talk about from a job interview standpoint: what is the CISO role? How is that portrayed in this particular organization? What does that mean? And then there are other things that you need to do before you get the job. What do I mean before you get the job? Well, what are you going to ask before you get the job? Reports. What reports are being given? Are they given to the board? How is cybersecurity information presented to the board? Can I see a presentation of what was presented to the board last quarter, last month, whatever? Was the CEO presenting it? That typically happens, right? Or was someone from a cybersecurity perspective presenting it? And get all that information ahead of time. Wouldn't it be great to have that info on day one? Yes, you want that. The other thing, what else do you want to have before you get the job? How big's the team? Do we have a cybersecurity team? How big is it? How many people are there? Because what's the first thing that people who are in an organization do when a new leader comes on board? They walk out the door. Bye, see ya, I got another job over here. You don't want your best people walking out the door. So you gotta build their trust coming in the door so they don't leave. Because that's maybe one of the number one perspectives from a CISO standpoint is losing good people, right? You lose those people, they're gone. It's all up in their heads. They didn't write it all down. So how are you gonna deal with that? How are you gonna manage those resources if they're gone out the door and you're kind of left with the hanger-ons? Maybe aren't as quite as sharp as the people who left. So build trust from the beginning. Understand. And the best way to build trust is give it away. Start trusting them right out the door. If you don't trust them, how can they trust you? So you gotta be straight with them. You gotta say, hey, I may be making changes, but I really need to get my feet on the ground and understand where are we coming from, what are we doing really well, what are we doing not so well, and what are your thoughts on this? But in conjunction, you're gonna have things in your hand, you're gonna have solutions in your hand from that. You say, okay, I can fix this. Here's a quick fix. Hold off on your quick fixes. When you first start this whole process, you need to understand what's going to happen before you do a quick fix. Because what? A quick fix, what if it takes too long? What have you lost? You've lost the ability to really understand a business perspective. You've lost the ability to interview each member of your team, both individually as well as a group. You've lost the ability to talk with the business units, understand how are we going to drive security from their viewpoint? How are we going to enable the business from their standpoint? How are we not stopping from being the person who says stop, person who says, okay, go. Here's how we're going to help alleviate your risks, at the same time enabling the business and talking in business terms, which can be money, right? And then what are the fundamental basics of what we're trying to do here? So one is you really want to come up from a standpoint and verify what you have. Maybe you do a risk assessment. Maybe you've got a methodology for doing that. Maybe you're implementing some type of report card or scorecard. So you can say, here's where we're starting from. I've got the lay of the land. Here's our starting point where we want to start from. And then over time, you can see how that progresses, and that can become your report card as you move forward. Other things that you want to do is go out and listen. Listen to your business constituents. Listen to the stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Who are the folks across the building or across the corporation that may give you a better understanding of what really drives the business? Sit with them. Sit with the stakeholders. Talk with their people. Get all layers of the organization, because the executives may not know what's going on at the bottom level, right? That never happens, right? It never happens. Business executives don't know what's going on at the floor level. Happens all the time, right? Every day it happens. So get the ground level perspective as well as a high level perspective so you know what to talk about. What are the issues? How are they being addressed? What's not being done? You can do that from that. And then, one of the things from a fundamental standpoint is if you find problems early in the design cycle, it pays off down the line. What's the most expensive way to find a problem? After it's implemented. So if you're doing something like security DevOps or something like that, which has design built into it to catch those problems up front, that's going to save the company money. Make sure you're thinking proactively and you're not just saying, we'll just put a Band-Aid over here, a Band over here, and we'll call it good. Think about things proactively. That's what you're here to do. You're here to think. They're paying you to think and use your judgment as you move forward. The next piece I want to share with you is talking with the board of directors. This is something that, there's books written, right? There was a fellow out there with a book on this. Get the book, right? Get all the information you can on this and understand boards are changing. Used to be that the boards say, you're a CISO, you own all the cyber risk for the company. It's your butt in the line. Well, that's never going to change. But in addition to that, now the CEO, their butt's on the line. Board of directors, butts on the line. Why? This SEC regulation is coming up. It puts more emphasis on sharing that risk. So now you have partners in this, which is a good thing. The problem is, okay. The problem is, how do we then look at that from a business perspective? A CFO looks and addresses risk in a very different way than we do. They look at it dollars and cents, pure and simple. We may look at it a different way. Well, cyber risk over here, maybe it's endpoint protection, maybe it's different ways of architecting security to better protect ourselves. Different. You've got to put yourself in business terms so they can then understand. The best way I look at that is CFO has been handling risk for decades, right? They're looking at things like fraud, embezzlement. They know how to deal with those types of risks. They don't have a clue with cyber risk. How does that work? So it's a whole education process. You need to educate them to figure that out. And the board doesn't know this either. The board may think they know, or they may not know what they don't know. And it's your job to educate them, and you may have to educate them at a second grade level instead of a college level or a university level. You may have to talk with them, understand how can we communicate in terms that you get so you can make that difference. And then from a sponsor standpoint, you really want to gain not just a mentor who's on the board, but someone who can sponsor you, someone who can talk about what your vision is all about when you're not there. So you've got someone to represent you when you're looking at how I'm going to set the expectations from a cyber standpoint, and who's going to be that voice when I'm not around to answer the call. From a leadership standpoint, I talked a little about strategy already. The middle slide here, people, process, technology. We've heard that for years, decades, right? I'm replacing technology with budget. And the reason is I want to talk in business language, not IT language, not cybersecurity language. People, process, and budget. Doesn't have the same ring to it, I know. But that's how you need to speak. And what does budget mean? How are they going to pay for things? How are you going to bring in this new solution that you know works really well? How do you justify it? Who's my HR partner? Who's my finance partner? And how do I build these connections so I can get in here, and when I need something badly, I can get the funding that I need? So it's not about you. And I know that people going into this who are applying to become C-level executives or CISOs, there's an ego, and you need that. But you also need to be humble. And you need to come in here with a complete attitude. I'm going to listen. Listen, listen, listen. And that's actively listening. Using your questions. When you listen, you're actually asking specific questions that they can start building an impression of what you don't know and what you do know and how you can help. These are things that build relationships, and relationships drive the kind of business that you want to achieve. So rapport is important. Confident, not defensive, and a business enabler. That's so important. You're enabling the business. You're not just saying, we're going to hold the wall until you do this and I get to implement this solution. We can't do anything. Well, that's not good. How do you make it so that business executive is looking at you and saying, this is really how we want to proceed because it's good for the business? Think of creative solutions. I've got a client that looked at the penetration test deliverable and said, hey, I can deliver that to my prospective clients in the finance sector, in the healthcare sector, heavily regulated forums. I'll deliver our pen test solution to them, show them deliverable, here's how we're moving with this, here's how we're moving forward from a vulnerability standpoint. Think outside the box. Don't view it as, okay, there's this black box, we're just going to pour money down the hole, never see the money again. And what I want to do in this slide is, you want to think, you guys. That's what they're paying us for. They're paying us for your brain. They're not paying us just to do what we did in our previous job. You have to think now. You have to make judgments. There's a balance, there's a scale, and then in the middle of that head, right? So we're going to link, we're going to think, we're going to plan ahead. We're going to think, how do we make this work better for us and for the company, because I'm a shareholder now. I'm not just working on a job making my salary, and it's a little bit more than I used to make before. How are you going to do that? Don't jump to conclusions. Wait, figure things out. If you come in and say, okay, yeah, everything is great. You know, I looked at this and everything looks really good. What's going to happen in 6 months when you have a breach and you want to replace that? So think ahead. We're playing chess. How are we going to think ahead and say, okay, how are we going to deal with that if that comes up in the future? Don't paint a really rosy picture. Oh, it's good, but I think it could be improved. You're setting expectations. And you're looking at things from a standpoint of, I'm being proactive, I'm thinking of the benefit of the company, not just myself, not just where we stand today, but how we're going to conclude in the future. So I do want to just kind of express my appreciation for ISSA. If you want to scan this QR code, it will take you to our next meeting, which is October 19th. We are having not a CISO, but in a similar type position from Lululemon come and present to us. We do have a dinner here. The meeting's at 6:30, so it's after hours on Mercer Island, so it's convenient, hopefully, for you to attend. Free parking, which everybody likes, right? You come and visit with us, talk to us. Great way to meet you. We are having another session on this topic at Secure World, which is in November 8th. We're having a session at 8 a.m., so if you want to talk more about this topic, we'll be there. We'll be having a kind of a hands-on session. I'm going to try to get some of the CISOs to join me if they can. So I think that'll be just kind of a fun session for everyone to kind of talk, get a little more detail on this. Maybe it's helpful. See what your feedback is. And then my contact info. Happy to hear what you like, what you didn't like, how we can make this better. Because it's all about making this work for all of us. It's not about me. It's not about any of you. It's how do we make this better for everybody to be more successful. Thank you.